Soundcore Motion Booms. Been taken on all comers. Not just a single one, a pair of them. And they work as a pair seamlessly. You pair them once, turn them off. Next time you turn them on, they're linked. Nice and solid, it works every time. That's a joy to use. If you're coming from JBL, where stereo means going into the app each and every time, and it works sometimes it doesn't, and then you turn off, oh well, I need to repair. It's an absolute nightmare. 2 motion booms. Now, you keep asking me, what's the nicest system you got? What do you like to listen to? Well, I keep telling you, for my high-end listen, at the end of the day, none of these portable speakers is like having a high-end proper hi-fi. But the nearest thing to it, I would say, has been my Minirig 2.2 system. I should point out, it does catch some people out that when you have mini rigs, and these are the Mark IIIs and the Mark III subs, they sell them as bundles 2.1. I don't know why they don't sell a bundle of 2.2. Why? Because when you hook these two of these up wirelessly, and then you take your aux lead and you connect it to your sub, they're in stereo. Master will be left, slave will be right, and your subwoofer is only getting the left channel. It is actually mono. Now, not all tracks are mixed to stereo in the bass. A lot of them are mono. It's not the huge deal you might think on paper. However, a proper left-right system would be 2 Minirig Mark IIIs and 2 subs. And then you've got a separate subwoofer for both the left and right channel. If you don't know, these are all 40-watt speakers. Of course, the wattage is only one element of how loud your speakers will go. So don't get too carried away by comparing wattage, because on paper, a 2.2 system is 160 watts compared to 60 watts on paper for 2 motion booms. You're going to think, well, this is absolutely ridiculous, but there are many, many variables involved. Let's also remember, 1 motion boom, 2 woofers, 2 passive radiators. So when we have a pair, we've got 4 surface area does matter. So that's one pointing out. 4 drivers, 4 passive radiators. Their woofers are 60 millimeters. We've got 73 millimeter drivers on the Mark III main speaker, and then we've got 74 millimeters on the subwoofers. Can 2 motion booms take on the powerhouse 2.2? Now here's the thing, I know you keep thinking, well, these are very expensive speakers, and they are. These are £140 each. In total, we're talking £560 versus £180. You'd expect this to be miles, multiples better than 2 motion booms, but you shouldn't, because as I keep pointing out, don't think of the mini rigs as one-off speakers. Don't think, well, how much value am I getting from it? Because it's about the whole modular system. I haven't got the minis on the table, but they even do the mini, which is part of this modular system. Wow. So I could be traveling light and take 1, I could take 2 and have them in stereo. I could take 1 subwoofer, or I could just have the subwoofers at home. But it's not just how I can set these up from anything from a 1.0 to a 2.2. But you also get, and this is a thing you keep on saying, oh, don't take away our auxiliary inputs. We love our auxiliary inputs. Well, not just one, no auxiliary input motion booms, not just 1 auxiliary. And it's not just an input. You have 2 in and outs on the mini rigs. That means not only wirelessly can you daisy chain unlimited numbers of minis. Oh, and by the way, these auxiliary are high-class auxiliary. This is built on originally an auxiliary-only speaker. So it's not an afterthought. You do get a better sound when if you don't go via Bluetooth and you do it via the auxiliary input. But outside of that, each one of those auxiliaries gives me a complete feed out. So never mind wirelessly, I can now daisy chain from each of these 2 other speakers that will play the whole frequency range. So I know £560 is expensive, and don't think of it as £560 worth of a one system. It's all the ways you could choose to use this. And also they have great battery life. They advertise this as on maximum, you get 7 hours from the Mark III, 8 hours out the sub, and I've tested up to 6 hours on a single motion boom at maximum volume. Other things to know, I've talked about the price. It is a big old battery on the Soundcore Motion Boom, 37 watt hours. Both of these have a 29 watt hour battery, but here's the thing, we keep saying, oh no, not SBC again, oh stop it, because not since the Motion Plus is one of these cheap speakers had aptX. Not aptX HD, but aptX, and I'm saying that because aptX on the Minirig. They're a small British company, hi-fi enthusiast, and that's why it's geared to the high end and it's expensive, because you're paying for the love, the detail and the attention they put into these speakers. So you do get aptX, you do get a decent codec. Obviously, this is wired only. All Bluetooth 5. In terms of weight, the Sub and the Minirig mk3 together is basically one boom. So in terms of weight, they are equal. 550 grams, 875 grams, 1,540, basically 1.5 kilos. So it's basically, you add these up, you've got 1.5 kilos, and you've got 1.5 kilos. On my latency testing, it's going to be very device specific. On YouTube, and general latency is very good on the Minirigs at 60 milliseconds, 170 milliseconds, pretty poor YouTube and even playing local files over Bluetooth on the Motion Boom. So we're going to get straight into it. I'm not going to bother with low volume tests because you're not going to fire up your 2.2 or indeed a pair of Motion Booms if you want to listen at whisper quiet volumes. So straight into 75% volume.
You'll always be in my heart, like fading pictures. You are falling out of frame. We have only old memories, but I love you just the same. After all we've been through, I know I feel it like I lost a part of me too. But I think that if I told you everything that was on my mind, you would walk away like every ex of mine. And I think that if I lost you, I would lose my mind too. All I ever want from you is for you to stay, 'cause I don't think I could lose you. Baby, tell me everything I can do for you. If I lost you, I would lose my mind too. I couldn't bear to lose you again, oh. All I ever want from you is for you to stay. If I lost you, I would lose my mind too. Hit a new low, should've said no. But I don't know how to let go.
Motion Boom, Minirig 2.2.
The most obvious thing to me is the slightly fatter bass on the Motion Boom. It does dig deeper, minus 24 at 50. That's 5 decibels up on the Minirig 2.2 at 50 hertz. 30 to 65 hertz, minus 28, minus 26 and less. That says 2 decibels advantage in the deep bass to the Motion Boom. But overall, the Minirig 2.2 with its 2 subs does have the most bass because it's 2 decibels up in the upper bass, 100 to 200 hertz. Stronger here on the Minirig 2.2, a bit more recessed on the Motion Boom. And then again, 65 hertz to 100 hertz. I'm calling it mid bass. This is the Motion Boom, a little bit stronger on the Minirig 2.2 by about a decibel. Slightly stronger bass on the Minirig 2.2, but the Motion Boom digs a little bit deeper. If you look at the balance of the frequency response with my custom settings, the Motion Boom, if we look at the mids, 200 to 4 kilohertz. So around this section here, these mids, they're about the same overall, Motion Boom and the Minirig 2.2. The difference is a bit more lower mids on the Motion Boom, and it's more mids, upper mids on the Minirig 2.2. Perhaps the biggest difference is presence region, 4 to 6 kilohertz. Talking around here, so they will say that's the area of clarity, minus 30 on the Minirig, minus 33 on the Motion Boom. That's why it sounds a bit recessed when everything else is equal. But then, if you look at what they call the brilliance region, 6 kilohertz and up, which is where they would say you get the airy sound signature from, we're stronger on the Motion Boom. That is pushed quite heavily in the EQ, though. We're a bit rolled off now, Minirig 2.2.
I do have to point out again, even for me, maybe the difference was not as great as I was expecting. Got to remember, these are not huge enclosures, and the total surface area is different on Motion Boom, and even in terms of size, it's almost smaller in terms of size. Certainly, it's about at most it's equal in size and weight for each pairing, but highly modular, and that's what you're really paying for, a highly modular system. However, having said that, while the differences are smaller, they are definite. This is definitely a warmer sounding signature. This is definitely a punchier, with a more detailed sound signature. It did surprise me, but it shouldn't have. Still goes down deeper on the Motion Boom before fully rolling off. You do hear it down to 40 hertz, and it's more like down to 50 hertz before rolling off on the Minirigs. And you're probably thinking, but with a dedicated subwoofer, by the way, that's a ported design and the driver on the front, you may be thinking you expected more. Very much with Minirig, this whole sound signature has always been a very punchy one rather than deep bass, and geared to high volumes as well, I must say. And that's the thing, the more volume you stick on your Minirig mk3, the more the bass kicks in on the subwoofer. So it's not till you're basically hitting maximum volumes, you're getting the full benefit of the subwoofers. It's definite, but not huge. You can definitely hear this is more hi-fi. It's more of a natural sound. There's a better, it's a tighter sound. There's more of a definite soundstage. You can place instruments better. This is a bit woolly. It's certainly warm, but it goes deeper. But they're both enjoyable, but I would say a bit more clinical on the Mark IIIs. That is the nature of the Mark IIIs, I must say. And by the way, I did record that on axis. Why? Because if I only have the Mark IIIs on their own, definitely fire them up. It's definitely tuned to be played that way up, because the high end is very hot, as I would say, and you don't get all that high end. They do it on purpose, because if you're listening like that, 45 degrees, you hear a more natural sound. But once you fire up one of the subs, I think it's nicely in balance, actually, even though it's got the rise at the high end. It just seems that it's more balanced. The extra bit at the bottom is balanced by the extra bit at the top. So I did put it on axis, and I would listen to them on axis when I had the sub. Without sub, I'd listen to it that way up. But it's clearly more hi-fi. I always say it's more hi-fi, but a big difference in price. 3 times the price compared to Motion Boom. So if you're tight on budget, you're definitely going to go for Motion Booms on my 75% test. But what if it's all about, I'm going to have a party, I want to impress my girlfriend, it's got to go loud and sound good. So ultimately, 100% volume, which is, quite, as I said, a lot of the gearing is to maximum volume, and that's where I would expect to hear it at its best. And maximum volume for all these speakers.
Adrenaline, I need a rush of the blood under my skin, taking me higher, so high adrenaline, making the morning air so fresh and so clean. It's taking me over, oh adrenaline, taking me higher, 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 taking me higher. Adrenaline, I need a rush of it right under my skin, taking me higher, so high adrenaline, like in the morning air so fresh and so clean. It's taking me over, oh adrenaline, I need a rush of it right under my skin, taking me higher, so high adrenaline, like in the morning air so fresh and so clean. It's taking me over, oh adrenaline. Adrenaline, I need a rush of it right under my skin, taking me higher, so high adrenaline, like in the morning air so fresh and so clean. It's taking me over, oh adrenaline, taking me higher, taking me higher, taking me higher, so high adrenaline, taking me higher, taking me higher, taking me higher, so high adrenaline.
So ultimately, the motion boom goes the loudest, but by a fraction. It's within margin of error, 0.3 of a decibel. Overall, the same loudness. Peak is exactly the same, 108 decibels. But we're still digging deeper, 40 hertz, which is low, minus 37, minus 40. We're 3 decibels up in the deep bass on the Minirig 2.2. However, that's not the whole story, because the Minirig, as you can see, if you look at where it slopes off now on the motion boom, around 55 hertz, it's already sloping down. But on the Minirig 2, we're actually still rising there. We've actually got a peak there at 70 hertz. So because we're actually stronger, 50 hertz and up, and into the mid bass on the Minirig 2.2, you would say overall the bass is deeper on the Minirig with a 2.2 system, but minus 24, 30 to 200 hertz, total bass minus 24. It's 3 decibels down on the Minirig 2.2. So 3 decibels is doubling the power. That's big. That says, forget the nuances of where certain peaks are. Minirig 2.2, with its 2 subwoofers, as you would hope, is a lot stronger, fuller in the bass. The motion boom gets its loudness elsewhere in the frequency response. It's stronger in the mids by a decibel. It's 3 decibels up into the brilliance region, although it's still a decibel down, 4 to 6 kilohertz in the presence region. So a bit bass light, but pushing mids does mean it's a bit screechy now, a little bit tinny. The Minirig 2.2 still has that nice slope. It still feels like you're getting the whole of the sound there, even at maximum volume.
I'm going to hold my hands up. I'm going to say, hold my hands both up. And I'm not surrendering. I'm just saying, I admit, I expected the Minirig 2.2 to go louder than the Mark III, but than the motion booms. They go about the same, but that's not the whole story. It's falling apart, isn't it, after you go past 80% on the motion boom. It's falling away in the bass. By the way, that's with my custom settings. If you was to switch to default, you get maybe a decibel more in the bass. It's not huge, but you get less in the high end, a little bit more in the bass. It's going to make it sound a little bit more balanced default, but I mean, most of the time in custom is fine. As I say, I'm trying to keep it simple. One setting, all volumes, and that's why it's still custom at maximum volume. A bit screechy now, a bit thin, a bit tinny, but it's completely held together, isn't it? That's where the subs make the difference. If you're playing at low volumes, getting the subs is not going to make a huge amount of difference to you. Once you're over 80%, where all these other cheaper speakers are falling away, even on something cheaper, the JBL Extreme Price 3, well, all of the Extreme Price Series 1, 2 and 3, 80%, no more bass. You've had it. You're out of luck. We'll give you some mids and highs. That's it. That's not happening once you hook up the subs with the Mark III. So if you're going over 80% a lot on your speakers, if you like to play it loud, and let's face it, these are loud speakers. You know, I can hit 110 decibels peak at 1 meter. That is loud. And I'm basically doing the same with the Minirig setup. So if you're going loud, and you want to keep it a decent sound. It's not falling apart. It's holding it together all the way above that normal 80% slot. And that's, again, part of what you're paying for. Hi-Fi is like that, isn't it? Each extra element better that you want is going to cost you astronomically more. Each at the same, no matter how high you go into the thousands or £10,000 worth of realm, what you're paying for is only a slight bit more. That's the nature of hi-fi. So there's the comparison. The booms did better than I thought they would do in terms of overall loudness, certainly at the lower volumes. But this is what the Minirigs are about. It's about the modular system. It's about all your options. It's about going loud and not falling apart. Not many speakers you can say that about. And that's the hi-fi heritage and great battery life. But of course, it's not always that easy. So I have to admit, too many times I said, oh, I'm not going to set the whole thing up. And as I said, why don't they sell a 2.2 system? Because the full system is 2.2. The 2.1 means your bass, your subwoofer is only getting one, either the left or the right, depending on what you've hooked it to, out of the track. Again, a lot of music doesn't have stereo in the bass, but then some tracks are certainly mixed with stereo in the bass. So it's not the deal breaker that you might think it is. I think I've covered everything. So basically, expensive. Know what you're paying for. It's the nature of hi-fi, a little bit better, going to cost you a lot more, but it's not just about the sound, it's all the other options that you can do with that. And don't forget, you've even got the low gain mode. So if I just press that and it goes to a darker color, it's easier on the amp. So it's, in theory, there's less of a noise floor in low gain mode. High quality mode, you've also got a high quality auxiliary ins and outs, which you don't have on these other speakers, not even auxiliary at all. So we already knew fantastic blinking value on the motion booms. Still is great value, but it's not hi-fi. Minirig 2.2 is hi-fi. A lot of you probably don't even hear the difference, and you're probably thinking that the boom will do it for me anyway. In reality, when you hear them in person, because at the end of the day, whatever you're playing over is not the original. In reality, all things considered, the soundstage and the detail is there to a greater degree in a 2.2 with the Mark IIIs, but it is punchy. It's not to everyone's taste. I do like a warm sound. In some ways, I do prefer the warmth nature, but there's no hi-fi. I can't delve into it. I can't hear subtle bits of the track on the motion boom. The vocals are recessed, but the overall package is fantastic. So there you go. Minirig mk3 2.2 versus a pair of motion booms. Which one you're going to get, you're going to have to decide. So I just thank you for watching this video.